Blake Baker was on with Jacob Hester on Off the Bench this morning. LSU defensive coordinator had a lot of things that he had to say. I've got a story up on LouisianaSports.net right now that kind of talks about the quotes that he used in that story, but I wanted to play some of the sound here for you here on this Wednesday, and it starts with integrating the summer enrollees who are going to be here this weekend.
Coach Blunt does a really good job integrating them right away into the veteran group when it comes to lifting and running. And then as coaches, like you said, they've usually played a lot of football. They're experienced. So you're moving at a quicker pace from an installation standpoint. Like we get a couple hours a week with our guys in the month of June. But usually you meet with those guys kind of separate and catch them up to speed really quick. With a freshman, you might be staying on day one install for 1 or 2 days where, it's basically like taking a mini semester, I guess is probably the best way to put it in the academic sense.
18 new players coming in to the program on Friday and Saturday to start summer workouts. And we've talked about that aspect of this defense a ton. But what we haven't talked about as much is the guys they have coming back and the steps forward those guys can take. And Jake asked Blake Baker today, who are some guys you're looking to step up as leaders?
You got to start with having Harold Perkins back. He's just a natural leader for us. He brings a lot of energy. So definitely excited to have him back. But for some of the younger guys, when you look at that freshman class, Dominic McKinley, Ahmad Bro, Deshaun Spears, Devon Keys, P.J. Woodland, Gabe Relaford, that's a good group of freshmen that played a ton of snaps for us last year. So it'll be interesting to see, and like we, continue to talk about, we integrated with some transfers. And, we talk about before we bring in any of those guys, the number one thing our job is to bring competitive depth. And so I think you're going to see some guys step up from a leadership standpoint and just from a competitive depth standpoint that maybe were kind of fringe guys for us last year.
And those fringe guys are going to have to fight for their playing time because you're bringing in proven Power 5 commodities at a lot of different places. One guy who is not going to have to fight for playing time, in my opinion, is Whit Weeks. He was second in the SEC in tackles last year. Had just a great year statistically in terms of his production. Was it perfect? No. Was every angle he took perfect? No. Did he fill every gap? No. But it was his first year as really being the guy with Greg Penn in the middle of the defense. And obviously the biggest story with Whit is that he goes down in the bowl game, kind of a nasty-looking injury that had everybody really holding their breath. And Blake Baker talked about Whit getting back into playing shape.
He's doing really well. I mean, He talked about, yesterday he was at full speed doing football drills. And more than anything, it's just a fatigue standpoint as far as the next day, getting over that soreness just from using all those muscles and ligaments again. But he's dang near 100%.
Dang near 100% is a pretty good place to be as we approach the end of May. Whit has spent a lot of time in the training room over the last 5 months. Blake Baker has spent a lot of time in the training room over the last 5 months because he had shoulder surgery to kind of get that thing back to health. So he spent a lot of time with Whit there and understands how hard he's worked. And that's obviously going to be a huge part of LSU's defense moving into this year. Safety is an interesting spot because we are talking about those transfers a lot. We are talking about the addition of Tamarcus Cooley. You're talking about A.J. Halsey coming in. You're talking about Jordan Gilbert coming back, but from an injury, and then whether or not you want to put Mansour Delane back there or not. I mean, there are a lot of different options at safety. You've also got Javian Toviano, you've got Joel Rogers, and you've got Deshaun Spears. And Blake Baker has talked a lot about Deshaun Spears, and he did more of that this morning. Deshaun
Spears, I've been very vocal about there was nobody harder on Deshaun Spears than me last year. And that's just because of the potential that young man has, and to see him starting to really break through this spring, not only from a tackling standpoint, a physical standpoint, his leadership out on the back end, he had a really outstanding spring.
Some of those guys, when we're at practice, just look a little bit different. And I'm not completely qualified to give you the difference in the power and the ISO and the duo runs. I'm not completely qualified to give you the exact zone beaters and man beaters that you got to use in the red zone. I understand all of those concepts. Do you need me to break them down for you on the air? No. Got a feeling our morning show is going to be pretty good at doing that this football season. But I can go out to practice and tell you physically who looks different than who. And when you watch the safeties play, Deshaun Spears looks different than all of the other ones. And that means there's upside there the other guys don't have. You don't have to be the biggest and the fastest and the strongest to be the best. Like, yeah, if you look like LaRon Landry or Eric Reed, that's awesome. But LSU's had some really good safeties in the past that weren't Adonis back there. I mean, Grant Delpit wasn't even Adonis back there. He didn't look like Eric Reed, but he had instincts, he had ball skills, he had toughness, and he was great. And that was evident in his high school years, it was evident in his college years, and then he's moved on to the NFL and been really good at that. So Deshaun Spears does have those attributes. It's just a matter of developing and making sure that he is taking the necessary steps. Last year was his first year. We'll see what this year does hold. The last one here in terms of the safeties is talking about whether or not that's the most wide open room.
There's a great mix of old and young when you look at Jordan Gilbert. You look at A.J. Halsey, those two guys playing a lot of snaps. Then you got Toviano, who's kind of bounced around in the secondary, but I thought he had a really good spring. Deshaun Spears is a young guy. Mansour can go back there. Tamarcus Cooley, he had a really good spring, who's a sophomore. So I think that room is really improved from a personnel standpoint here in the last 6 months, and I cannot wait to see them on the field.
They got to play better, no doubt. I mean, Brian Kelly was adamant about that. He said it publicly. They've got to get better at safety. They got a lot of options. It is hard for me to imagine that all of those options that LSU has got at safety are all going to be underwhelming. Like, two guys have got to step forward and be really quality players. We'll see, but the odds would tell you that if you bring that many talented guys into the room, somebody steps up and becomes a really, really strong player. One guy that stepped up and became a really strong player in college and in the NFL, and now he's coaching at LSU, is Kyle Williams. And it's been interesting to hear some of the things that Brian Kelly and Blake Baker have talked about in regard to Kyle Williams. We'll start here with the transition to Kyle Williams coming into the college game for the first time and kind of get a sense of how Baker feels that going. But I think the next quote is more important. So we'll start with the transition.
It's really been seamless. I mean, it's really been quite impressive when you talk about, all the intricacies of college football. The X's and O's and the coaching part is the minimal as far as, the adjustment. But the way he's picked it up in recruiting, the way he manages his room, he's really, really impressive. And the one thing that I love about Kyle is you know where you stand. He's pretty much a straight shooter, yes. and I appreciate that. And I think he's done an outstanding job with our defensive tackles.
Here's the piece to this that is the most interesting to me, and it gives me a lot of hope. Now, let me be clear. When you go to a basketball press conference, when the new head coach is introduced, the new head coach never says, hey, we want to sit on the ball. We want to be very, very deliberate. We're going to shoot some 10-footers. And then defensively, we're going to sit back, react to what they had to do. No, every basketball coach is going to go, we want to get out in space. We want to play an exciting brand of basketball. We're going to attack you on defense. We're going to dictate the terms to you on offense. We're going to make threes. We're going to be exciting. We're going to fill the arena. That's what you say. A new defensive coordinator is going to come in football in his press conference, and he's going to go, we're going to attack. We're going to put the defense to dictate the terms to the offense. And never say, well, we'll kind of figure out what the offense wants to do, and we'll take a look at trying to maybe get in the way here and there, and hopefully on third down we can get them off the field. Like, you're always going to be attack, aggressive. Those are the buzzwords in an introductory press conference. I get that. That does not make any of these coaches unique in any way. But Blake Baker does have a reputation of wanting to be aggressive more so than reactive. I think there were times where Dave Aranda would prefer to kind of keep the game in front of him. I think there were times, especially in 2019, where Dave Aranda looked and said, it's probably best we just don't give up a very big play because we're going to score 50 points anyway. So I think that what you're getting from Blake Baker is honest, but it's a generality with defensive coaches. However, at this specific position, I truly do believe that LSU wants to get more aggressive, wants to get more dynamic. At defensive tackle, they want to go make plays instead of holding everything up to let everybody else go make plays. And that's how Kyle Williams made a living. And Blake Baker talked about that mindset and how he's coaching his players to now do that and how good a fit that is in Baker's defense.
Yeah, it was one of the first things when we sat down and kind of talked about this job opening. He talked about how the NFL has changed over the years, and that's really kind of when his career took off, when he wasn't necessarily being a two-gap defensive lineman or a defensive lineman that's holding offensive linemen off linebackers, and he's able to use his speed and quickness. That's what the game's evolved to, and that's what we want here, and that's what he views the game as. So it's all married up really well.
I love that quote because it's very simple for the average football fan to digest. When Kyle Williams had to be a two-gap guy, which means stand up the lineman and then wait and see what gap he needs to go fill and then go get in it, he wasn't good at it. When he was assigned, hey, get in that gap and screw something up for the offense, he was quick enough and fast enough to play that one gap. And that's what Blake Baker wants to be. LSU was very much a two-gap team 2 years ago. And they were slow, and they sat on blocks, and they just got crushed every which way you could get crushed because they weren't good enough to stand somebody up and then make a decision which way you're going to go. Get in a gap and go. And that's what Blake Baker wants to do, and that's what Kyle Williams did as well as anybody in the league for a long time. And now he can coach that. Now it's a matter of getting guys that can play it to his level. Not easy to do. But that's a very digestible piece of information to the average college football fan that gives me hope at the mindset, the mentality, and the coaching that's going to go into the defensive line this year. Go get in that gap and go be disruptive. And I think that's what they're going to try to do at defensive tackle. So that's a look at what Blake Baker had to say today on Off the Bench with Jake. If you'd like to read some of those quotes, I've got them detailed at LouisianaSports.net on the homepage, talking about Blake Baker, as well as some of the other things he has to say about the returning players, not necessarily all the transfers that are coming in, some guys that he's gotten to look at for over a year. What do they look like as LSU enters the summer into fall camp in August? Hey, thanks for watching Hunt on LSU. Before you get out of here, do us a couple of favors. Hit that like button, leave your comments below, and subscribe to the channel for all your Fighting Tiger football talk. See you next time.